When was the last time Laura had a good night's sleep? She couldn't remember. She rubbed her temple, a futile attempt to ease the pounding headache. Dark circles framed her once sparkling eyes, a testament to her sleep deprivation. The clamor of their bustling home echoed around her. Billy and Michaela, bickering over a forgotten chore, the incessant youthful energy of Lincoln and Logan, who were embroiled in a race around the kitchen island. The aroma of Bob's strong black coffee, which he brewed with practiced precision, attempted to mask the ensuing chaos. Laura watched as Bob shuffled around the kitchen, baby Logan perched on his hip, his light blue hat going astray as he navigated the morning routine. She found comfort in his domesticity, his steady presence. Suddenly, Bob looked up, his green eyes meeting Laura's tired ones.
You look exhausted, Angel. We need a break.
And so, the idea of a peaceful weekend getaway was born. They fantasied about the picturesque Pennsylvania towns, each a serene retreat far from their demanding routines. As they planned, Laura could almost taste the tranquility, the pure joy of uninterrupted sleep, the luxury of leisurely strolls through a series of main streets, each one unique, but all similar in the peaceful pace of life they offered visitors. But in the back of her mind, Laura could not shake off an uneasy feeling, a gnawing fear intertwined with anticipation. Her exhaustion-created forgetfulness, once a harmless quirk, had grown into an ominous presence in her life. Dreams and reality had begun to blur, leaving her stranded in a disorienting haze. And as they packed their bags, ready for their much-needed escape, she brushed off the feeling, attributing it to her nerves. Little did they know, their idyllic retreat would soon transform into a horrifying reality. As dawn spread its soft tendrils over Poquag, Bob and Laura loaded their bags into the car. Their children, young and old, bid them farewell. Their innocent laughter and playful antics were a stark contrast to the mild apprehension stirring in Laura's heart. The journey started with Bob's light-hearted banter filling the car, his laughter as infectious as his optimism. The lush green landscapes of Dutchess County blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors as they sped towards Pennsylvania, their dreams of respite from their hectic lives trailing behind them. Bob's face was radiant with the joy of their shared adventure. Laura, despite her weariness, was drawn to his youthful exuberance.
Ha ha ha, we should do this more often, Angel.
His words echoed in the comfortable silence, drawing a soft, weary smile from Laura. As Bob and Laura left the highway, following the narrow road leading to New Hope, the green expanse of Pennsylvania farmland embraced them. The quaint charm of the town was evident even from a distance. Nestled along the scenic Delaware River, New Hope stood as a symbol of tranquility and the unassuming grace of small-town America.
Look at this place, Laura. It's like stepping back in time.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Their eyes took in the historic architecture, a mosaic of 18th-century houses, rustic storefronts, all preserving the essence of a bygone era. The town seemed to breathe artistic spirit, with art galleries and colorful murals adorning its spaces. Even the vintage train puffing along the river's edge seemed to tell its own enchanting tale. As they parked their car, the scent of the river mixed with the aroma of fresh-baked goods wafted through the air. They walked towards the rustic diner they had spotted earlier. It was a quaint establishment, its exterior painted a cheerful red, adorned with antique signs and flower pots hanging from the awnings. Upon entering, the sight of retro checkered floors, red vinyl booths, and walls adorned with old Americana greeted them. The diner buzzed with chatter and the clattering of dishes, a pleasing soundtrack to the homey ambiance. Behind the counter, a friendly waitress served steaming mugs of coffee, her warm smile a testament to the town's inviting spirit.
Now this is a real diner.
Let's dig in, I'm starving.
Marlene, the elderly waitress, welcomed them with a warm smile that brightened her lined face. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her eyes sparkled with the wisdom of years, and her laughter echoed the joyous chimes of a forgotten era. Their conversation was warm and casual, filled with tales of Marlene's decades at the diner and stories of travelers she had met. As they bid Marlene goodbye, Laura felt a strange sense of familiarity. Had she dreamed about this diner? Was it déjà vu, or was it her tired mind playing tricks on her? She brushed the thought aside, attributing it to her exhaustion. As Bob and Laura's Yukon cruised the narrow winding roads towards Lititz, they found themselves enveloped in the sheer tranquility of Pennsylvania farmland. Their eyes feasted on the pastures and fields, interrupted occasionally by the charming stone farmhouses.
Angel, look at this. It's like we're in a postcard.
Yeah, it's picture perfect.
Lititz, a quaint borough in Lancaster County, held a certain old-world charm that instantly appealed to them. The neat rows of 18th-century buildings, well-preserved and adorned with rustic signs, were reminiscent of a bygone era. This was a town that celebrated its history with pride. Upon entering Lititz, the faint aroma of chocolate tickled their senses. The Wilbur Chocolate Factory, a beloved local institution, was nearby. It wasn't just the scent of chocolate that permeated the air, but also the sweet sense of community that the town offered. Finding a small, charming eatery was easy. Tomato Pie Cafe was an inviting spot with its vibrant colors and outdoor seating. The cafe was a cozy haven offering mouth-watering donuts, pies, and sandwiches.
You know I can't resist a good donut, Angel.
I know, Bob, I know.
Settling into their seats outside the cafe, Bob and Laura watched the slow rhythm of life in Lititz unfold. The calming sound of the Lititz Spring Park's babbling brook nearby was the perfect soundtrack to their dinner. Amidst the quiet simplicity of Lititz, they savored not just their meal but a moment of peace in the labyrinth that awaited them. As the sun began to set in Lititz, Bob and Laura finished their meal and began to stroll down Main Street, admiring its serene ambience, a stark contrast to the buzzing energy at home on any given day. The comforting silence of the town washed over them as they checked into their hotel, their tired bodies craving rest. As night fell, Lititz, the tranquil town known for its calm, was on the brink of a storm neither they nor their friendly waitress Marlene could have anticipated. Bob and Laura woke to a Lititz that was abuzz with an unusual energy. Sirens echoed through the otherwise quiet streets, and the chatter among the locals was louder than the day before. Over breakfast at their hotel, they learned about the horrific incident that had unfolded overnight. Marlene, the waitress they had bonded with just a day prior in New Hope, had been found murdered. Laura felt a chill run down her spine as she processed the news. They had just seen her, shared laughter and stories over coffee, and now she was gone. It felt surreal. Bob, too, was taken aback. His easygoing demeanor was clouded by the shocking news.
We just met her, Laura. It's unthinkable.
Yet, despite their shock, they tried to carry on with their day, exploring Lititz as planned. Laura's unease, however, lingered. The town, despite the tragic event, held on to its charm. The architecture was a tribute to the town's history, each brick seemingly holding a story. The serene parks offered a quiet refuge, but Laura couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, the strange familiarity of the diner, and now Marlene's unexpected death. In the evening, they attended a candlelight vigil held for Marlene. Laura looked around at the sea of somber faces, their features flickering in the soft candlelight. Marlene was loved, that much was clear. The loss had cast a shadow over the community, a dark cloud that was hard to ignore. As they returned to their hotel that night, Laura had trouble falling asleep. Her mind raced with memories of Marlene, their brief but memorable interaction, and the horrifying reality of her death. And in the silence of the night, Laura's exhaustion gave way to troubled dreams, a series of nightmares that left her tossing and turning. As the sun painted a warm hue over Lidditz, Laura and Bob found themselves engulfed in a cloud of fear and confusion. They sat huddled in their hotel room, their unease palpable. Bob, usually filled with laughter and banter, was unusually silent. His eyes were clouded with worry, and his playful nature was replaced by a grim determination. They had to figure this out.
Do you think it could be one of those bikers we saw at the diner, Bob?
Bob shook his head, running a hand through his dark hair.
I don't know, Laura. It could be anyone, but we didn't notice anyone unusual, did we?
Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at their door. A local policeman stood outside, asking routine questions about their encounter with Marlene. Their fear heightened as they realized they were not just bystanders anymore, but were part of the narrative of a real murder mystery. Bob and Laura spent the day locked in their hotel room, analyzing every detail of their interaction at the diner. They pondered over their brief encounter with a pair of rowdy bikers, the friendly old man who sat alone, and the seemingly harmless couple arguing in the corner. Yet none of them appeared to be a clear suspect. The peaceful vacation they had envisioned was quickly transforming into a horrifying ordeal. Laura's forgetfulness, her blurred dreams and reality, coupled with the chilling incidents, made her feel like she was living a nightmare. Their paranoia increased when they heard about another murder in Doylestown, a town they only stopped at briefly for coffee before arriving in Lidditz. In the quiet town of Doylestown, Bob and Laura enjoyed a cup of coffee, tucked away in the corner of a bustling cafe. A vibrant woman named Emily had served them with a bright smile. Her fiery red hair was as captivating as her energy, a stark contrast to the quiet town. She chatted freely with Bob and Laura, her laughter echoing through the diner, bouncing off the shiny metal stools and the checkered floors.
You folks have a lovely energy about you. Makes my day, honestly.
Her lively spirit had briefly lifted their moods, but the memory of her radiant smile now only amplified the horror of the news. The victim, Emily, was found in the same shocking condition as Marlene. The pattern was undeniable, the signature eerily similar. Emily, who had been brimming with life just a day ago, was now the victim of a senseless act of violence. Bob and Laura found themselves grappling with the disturbing memory of their last interaction with Emily, the vibrant image of the red-haired woman clashing with the dreadful news of her demise. The fear that someone might indeed be following them, mirroring their path, was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Laura couldn't help but recall Emily's laughter, her warm presence, and the chilling reality that her life had been snuffed out so cruelly. It felt like a sick, twisted game, and they were unwilling participants.
Bob, we had just talked to her. It's like a nightmare.
It's horrifying, Laura, but we need to stay strong for us and for our kids.
Their memories of Emily, Marlene, and the unsettling murders were becoming etched into the canvas of their journey, casting a long, haunting shadow over their once peaceful getaway. It was as if a string of murders was following them, tainting their journey. Fear wrapped its icy fingers around them. Were they being followed?
Bob, do you think someone is following us?
I don't know, Laura, but we need to be careful.
In the crisp morning light, Lidditz seemed to hold its breath. With every passing hour, Bob and Laura found themselves deeper into the labyrinth of uncertainty and fear. The charming Pennsylvania towns they had been so excited to explore now held a sinister tinge. They decided to push forward with their trip, albeit with heightened caution. As they navigated the winding roads to their next destination, Jim Thorpe, Laura couldn't help but glance over her shoulder. The feeling of being followed was persistent, a prickling unease at the back of her mind. They kept mostly to themselves, the charm of the small town lost in the shadow of their fears. Bob wore a mask of forced cheerfulness, his attempts at levity falling flat in the grim atmosphere.
We need a bit of normalcy, Laura. Let's try to enjoy ourselves.
Laura nodded, the weight of her fears pressing down on her. Their attempts at enjoyment were cut short when news of a third murder reached them. The victim was in Lidditz. Again, the town they were just in. The victim this time was Peter, a charming barista. In the quaint cafe tucked away on the town's main street, he had served them the most aromatic coffee and delightful pastries. Peter was a tall, lanky man in his mid-30s, with an unruly mop of curly hair that was usually tucked away under his barista cap. He had the friendliest eyes, twinkling with warmth and a contagious enthusiasm for his work. He had a way of making each customer feel special, his infectious energy filling the quaint cafe with an inviting ambience. His passion for his job was evident in his attention to detail. He remembered their preferences from their first order, astonishing them when they visited again later. Peter's murder felt particularly personal. Having shared laughs and conversations over coffee, Bob and Laura felt a certain bond with the jovial barista. The news of Peter's death hit them hard. Peter, like Emily and Marlene, had become a part of their journey, a brief but impactful interaction that was now forever marred by tragedy. The bright smile of the barista, the spark in his eyes, and the gentle warmth of his words were now just remnants of a life taken too soon. Bob, in a strained voice, attempted to lighten the atmosphere, but his words rang hollow in the room.
We'll remember them, Laura, all of them. They touched our lives in their own way, and we won't forget that.
But the grim reality hung heavily in the air. The shadows of their journey were becoming darker, their fear more palpable, as the labyrinth of Laura's nightmares continued to weave its terrifying narrative. As they drove through the narrow streets of Jim Thorpe, lined with stately mansions, they couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been following them. The small town's beauty was slightly tainted with an underlying sense of dread. The town center, with its eclectic mix of boutique shops, cozy eateries, and art galleries, was bustling with life. But the murmur of the crowd, usually comforting in its regularity, seemed to have taken on a more ominous tone. Every passing stranger felt like a potential threat. They chose to dine at the Molly Maguire's pub, a historic establishment known for its classic Irish fare. The rustic interior, complete with dark wood and vintage memorabilia, usually evoked a sense of nostalgia. But for Bob and Laura, it felt strangely foreboding.
Bob, do you feel like we're being watched?
I do, Laura, but we've got to keep going. We can't let fear paralyze us.
As they continued their meal, their eyes often darted to the pub's window, watching the shadows that danced on the street outside. Jim Thorpe, a town usually abuzz with the joy of small-town life, now echoed the chilling notes of their growing fears. They returned to their hotel room, a sense of foreboding hanging in the air. The strange circumstances were taking a toll on Laura. She found herself caught in the web of her dreams and reality, her forgetfulness blurring the lines further. As Bob comforted Billy and Michaela over a strained phone call, Laura couldn't help but wonder. Was she missing something? Could she have prevented this?
Is it really possible someone is following us?
Yet in the midst of her musings, her exhaustion took over. And as she fell into a fitful sleep, the dark corners of her mind came alive, the labyrinth of her dreams becoming even more sinister. Morning had never felt more ominous. As the soft rays of dawn broke through the heavy drapes of their hotel room in Jim Thorpe, Bob and Laura woke up to another day of uncertainty. The quaint charm of Doylestown was overshadowed by the lingering dread. The narrow cobblestone streets, lined with historic buildings and quirky boutiques, felt claustrophobic. The vibrant murals painted on the walls of the local art gallery took on a sinister tone, their colors seeming to fade under the weight of their growing apprehensions. They sat in silence at a small cafe, their uneaten pastries a testament to their unsettled state of mind. As they glanced around the lively cafe, each face felt like a potential suspect. Was it the quiet man reading his newspaper in the corner, his glasses perched on his nose? Or perhaps the boisterous group of teenagers chattering away at the table across from them?
Do you think it's someone we've interacted with? Someone from the diners or the cafes?
Laura didn't respond immediately, her eyes distant. Her mind was a whirlpool of thoughts, the nagging feeling that they were missing a crucial clue gnawing at her.
I don't know, Bob. I don't know.
Despite the noise around them, their conversation felt like a quiet whisper, a secret shared between them amidst the oblivious crowd. The thought of being targeted, of someone shadowing their every move, made the bustling cafe feel hostile, every friendly face a potential adversary. Their thoughts turned to the victims, Marlene, Emily, Peter. Ordinary people like them, who had crossed paths with them, only to meet a horrific fate. Was there a connection they were missing? Was there a reason these particular individuals were targeted? The answers eluded them, their predicament growing more complex. As their suspicion grew, so did their fear. The feeling of being hunted, of a predator lurking in the shadows, made the charming town of Jim Thorpe feel like a trap, each corner a potential danger. Bob and Laura returned to their hotel room, the cheerfulness of the Pennsylvania afternoon clashing with their heavy hearts. Every friendly smile, every jovial conversation felt like a haunting echo of the interactions they had with Marlene, Emily, and Peter. They spent the afternoon poring over the details, attempting to find a pattern, a connection, anything that would shed light on their tormentor. They recalled their interactions with each victim, the words exchanged, the places visited. Laura's mind raced as she desperately searched her memories, her forgetfulness a hindrance in this dire situation. Laura's hand instinctively went to her forehead, the stress making her feel increasingly tired. Bob, noticing her discomfort, offered a comforting squeeze on her shoulder.
We'll figure this out. We just need to stay vigilant.
Their conversation was interrupted by a news alert on the television. The news anchor reported a fresh murder in Stroudsburg, their next stop. The victim was a young man named Thomas, a local bookstore owner. Bob and Laura shared a glance, the realization of the chilling pattern sinking in. They had planned to visit that bookstore. The idea that they were merely one step away from becoming victims themselves was petrifying. As they looked at each other, their eyes reflected the growing dread. The labyrinth was closing in on them. The walls of their reality were starting to crumble, and the sinister plot was becoming too real, too personal. They were caught in a nightmare, a deadly game of cat and mouse, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish friend from foe. As the evening descended, the shadows grew longer. Bob and Laura huddled together, each lost in their thoughts. They could no longer deny the chilling reality. They were in the eye of the storm, and their hunter was closing in. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, haunting shadows across the quiet streets of Jim Thorpe. Bob and Laura sat huddled together in their hotel room, a palpable tension lingering in the air. The news of Thomas's murder in Stroudsburg had shaken them to their core. The once picturesque small towns of Pennsylvania now felt like a sinister trap, each turn holding a potential threat. Bob gazed at Laura, the worry lines etched deeply on his forehead. He could see the toll the situation was taking on her. The vibrant woman he loved was now shrouded in worry, her beautiful eyes clouded with fear. He reached over and gently held her hand.
We need to go home, Laura.
Laura looked at him, her eyes wide. She was about to protest, but he firmly squeezed her hand 3 times.
We can't put ourselves in danger anymore. We need to think about Lincoln and Logan, about Billy and Michaela. We've been thinking we're stuck in this nightmare, but we forget. We hold the string. We can decide to step out.
Laura was silent for a moment, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. She thought about her children, their innocent faces flashing before her eyes. She nodded, a sense of determination setting in.
You're right, Bob. We need to protect our family. We need to go home.
They quickly packed their bags, the eerie silence of the hotel room enveloping them. As they left the hotel, they took one last look at the charming town. But the town's charm was now lost to them, replaced by a chilling sense of dread. As they hit the road, the series of small towns behind them, a sense of relief washed over them. They were heading home, back to the safety of their family. But as the car sped away, they couldn't shake off the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. The drive back to Poquag was a blur. The towns and cities passed by like ghostly apparitions, their once inviting charm now replaced with an ominous undertone. Bob gripped the steering wheel tightly, his focus unwavering on the road ahead. Laura, on the other hand, was lost in thought, her mind replaying the horrific events that had marked their supposed weekend getaway. As they crossed the state line, Laura glanced at a local newspaper they had picked up in Stroudsburg. Her eyes landed on a small column at the bottom. It was a short report on a missing woman from Jim Thorpe, her photo printed alongside. It was Susan, the friendly waitress who had served them breakfast. The same warm smile that had greeted them in the diner was now frozen in black and white. Laura's heart sank. She remembered Susan mentioning her plans to visit her sister in Stroudsburg. The nagging feeling of a connection, a pattern, returned.
Bob, look at this.
She handed him the paper at the next stop. Bob's eyes widened in recognition and concern, yet another link in their tragic chain.
Susan. She was going to Stroudsburg, the same path we took.
The second clue came unexpectedly as they were about halfway home. As Bob was filling up the tank at a gas station, Laura decided to clear out some trash from the back seat. She found a receipt from the cafe in Lidditz, the place where they had last seen Peter alive. But something struck her as odd, the timestamp on the receipt. It was almost an hour later than she remembered leaving.
Bob, look at this. We left the cafe at around 3, right? Then why does this receipt say 3:57 p.m.?
Both clues stirred a pot of uncertainty. Were they mere coincidences or signs of a deeper, more sinister connection? As they resumed their journey, these unsettling questions filled the car, adding to the tension that already hung in the air. The sun had fully set by the time Bob and Laura reached Poquag. The familiarity of their home, bathed in the soft bluish glow of the office light, was a sight for sore eyes, but the relief of their return was marred by the mystery they brought back with them. Inside, the house was quiet, the children fast asleep. As Laura went to check on them, a wave of guilt washed over her. Her kids, oblivious to the danger their parents had narrowly escaped, slept peacefully.
We're home, Bob. We're finally home.
In the dim light of their bedroom, they sat down and unpacked the chain of events. The receipt, the news about Susan, each piece of information was a clue, a key that could unlock the truth.
So we have 2 things that don't line up. First, Susan goes missing around the same time as we were in Jim Thorpe. Then, the receipt from Lidditz, showing a time later than we remember.
The silence that followed was a testament to the complexity of their situation. Despite their exhaustion, sleep was a distant promise. Their minds were at work, desperate to make sense of the haunting mystery. But with each passing hour, Laura's forgetfulness seemed to increase. Details were slipping through her fingers, making it harder to recall key moments. Her frustration was visible, her usual composed demeanor faltering.
I just can't remember, Bob. It's like I'm trying to grasp at smoke.
We'll figure this out, Laura. We have to. For now, let's just try and rest. Maybe a fresh perspective in the morning will help.
With their questions unanswered and fears unspoken, they climbed into bed, their dreams haunted by the craziness they had left behind. But as they lay in the dark, one thing was clear. Their journey into the labyrinth was far from over. The morning light peeked through the curtains, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled in their hearts. Bob and Laura woke up to a quiet house, their sleep marred by nightmares, their minds still a whirlwind of questions. As Bob was brewing coffee, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a news alert from a Poughkeepsie news outlet. His heart froze as he read the headline, "Murder Shocks Poughkeepsie Community." The article reported that the body of an unidentified man was found early that morning in the peaceful town.
Laura, come here.
Laura rushed to his side, her eyes widening as she read the chilling news. Their labyrinth, it seemed, had followed them home.
But we just got back. We were miles away. This can't be happening.
Their world spun. The safety they had associated with their home was crumbling. A strange, chilling fear began to creep in. Was the murderer in Poughkeepsie as well? Or was this all an unfortunate coincidence? The questions swirled, adding to the fear and confusion that had become a constant companion. Bob held Laura, the news of the murder in their hometown casting a long, dreadful shadow over them. They had returned home hoping to escape it, but instead, it seemed to have expanded, its scary reach now extending to their very doorstep. The ominous news of a murder in their quaint town of Poughkeepsie hung heavy in the air. As Bob and Laura came to terms with this terrifying development, it was clear that the labyrinth they had stumbled upon was no longer confined to distant towns. Bob, a business analyst by trade, couldn't help but engage his investigative mind. That morning, he decided to visit the scene himself. There, he discovered the first piece of evidence. Cordoned off by the police, he could clearly see a single piece of paper clenched in the victim's hand from afar.
Laura, there's an address written on a paper the victim's holding. It's an address in Lidditz.
Laura's heart skipped a beat. They had stayed in Lidditz. It was a terrifying link. Then Bob noticed something else. A discarded coffee cup lay in a nearby trash bin, its logo unmistakable.
It's from the cafe, the one from Jim Thorpe. We were there.
Finally, the most striking piece of evidence was tied around the victim's neck. A scarf. Bob recognized it as the one Laura had admired on a woman in Stroudsburg. It was unmistakable. A beautiful hand-woven scarf, dyed a unique shade of blue.
The scarf, Laura. The woman's scarf from Stroudsburg. He's wearing it.
Each piece of evidence was a chilling link to their journey, a breadcrumb trail leading directly back to them. The labyrinth was not just following them. It was woven around them, every turn reflecting their own steps. As Bob returned home from the crime scene, he was engulfed by a storm of emotions. The pieces of evidence he had found felt like heavy chains, tying them irrevocably to the murders. Inside their home, a tense quietude loomed. Bob found Laura in the living room, her eyes locked onto the screen of her laptop. It displayed a map of their journey across Pennsylvania, marked with the towns they visited. It looked eerily similar to a sinister breadcrumb trail leading to their doorstep.
Did we bring this home with us?
I don't know, Bob. I don't know.
The stark fear in Laura's eyes mirrored Bob's own. Their sanctuary had been breached. their peace shattered. As they traced the timeline of their journey against the reported crimes, the coincidences seemed less like happenstance and more like a disturbing pattern.
We need to go to the police. We need to tell them what we know.
But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Would the police believe their story? Or would they become suspects in this horrifying series of murders? Just then, Laura's phone buzzed, snapping them out of their thoughts. It was her old friend from her nursing days. She whispered into the phone, her face growing paler with each passing second. Laura ended the call and turned to Bob.
The killer used a mix of drugs that I could have easily accessed.
The room seemed to spin. Laura was a nurse, trained in palliative care. She knew about the medications that could ease a patient into death. The labyrinth was closing in around them, and they were tangled in its deadly grasp. Laura's hands were shaking as she set the phone down. The silence in the room was deafening, their minds spiraling into the chilling implications of the new information. Bob watched Laura, her pale face mirroring the terror he felt. The labyrinth seemed to have ensnared them with its unseen shadows, drawing them deeper into its twisted corridors.
Laura, we have to go to the police.
Yes, we should. But Bob, what if they don't believe us?
Bob didn't have an answer. The thought had been gnawing at him, too. But they knew they had to try. This thing was closing in, and they had to do something to fight their way out. As they gathered their thoughts and evidence, they knew their next step was fraught with uncertainty. To go to the police was to invite a whole new set of challenges. But they had no other option. With each passing minute, the weight of their situation seemed to grow heavier. The labyrinth had followed them to their doorstep, intertwining their lives with its dark threads. The question now was, could they untangle themselves, or were they destined to be lost within? The dawn of the new day was marred by the weight of impending dread. As Bob woke up and went through his morning routine, he was hit by a startling revelation. The signs were there all along, hidden in plain sight, and now they formed an undeniable pattern. He replayed the events of the past days in his mind. The crime scenes, the evidence, the coincidences. All roads led to Laura. A shiver ran down his spine. Could it really be? Could his beloved Laura be the murderer they had been so afraid of? His mind went back to Laura's forgetfulness, her increasing tiredness. He recalled her talking about sleepwalking incidents from her childhood, the mix of drugs used by the murderer, drugs Laura had easy access to. His heart pounded in his chest.
No, it can't be Laura.
He found a note on the kitchen counter, a to-do list Laura had written the night before. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, but it was messier, rushed. Bob's heart sank as he noticed something peculiar. The letter L, it was exactly the same as the one written on the note found in Doylestown. His mind was reeling. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming an image he didn't want to see. His wife, his Laura, was the labyrinth. She was the murderer they feared. With a heavy heart, Bob sat in the kitchen, staring at the to-do list. His mind was flooded with the horrifying implications of his discovery. The quiet morning offered no solace, its calmness starkly contrasting the chaos in his mind. He looked around their home, the place he shared with Laura and their children, now echoing with a haunting truth. He felt like a stranger in his own life, every familiar object tainted with newfound dread.
I need to talk to her. I need answers.
As the sun rose higher, he heard Laura stir upstairs. She descended the stairs, her blonde hair tousled from sleep, her eyes still heavy.
Morning, Bob. What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost.
Bob took a deep breath. He gently took Laura's hand and led her to the living room, the to-do list clenched tightly in his other hand.
Laura, we need to talk.
He asked her about her sleepwalking, about the drugs, about the note with the L. The room filled with tension as Bob gently but firmly questioned his wife, desperately hoping there was an explanation, an excuse, anything other than the unthinkable.
What are you saying, Bob? Are you accusing me?
He asked her about her sleepwalking, about the drugs, about the note with the L. The room filled with tension as Bob gently but firmly questioned his wife, desperately hoping there was an explanation, an excuse, anything other than the unthinkable. The air in the living room thickened with tension as Bob continued to question Laura. Her eyes widened with shock, her lips trembling as she absorbed the weight of Bob's accusations.
Bob, couldn't. How can you even suggest this?
Bob, seeing her shock and disbelief, felt a pang of guilt. He didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence was stacking up.
Laura, I found the note. Your handwriting. The L. It matches.
Laura seemed to freeze, her eyes darting to the crumpled shopping list in Bob's hand. She looked at it, then at Bob, her confusion giving way to terror.
But I don't remember. I couldn't.
As they sat in the suffocating silence of the living room, Bob felt a shudder of dread. The labyrinth had woven its way into their lives, its insidious design twisting their reality into a terrifying nightmare.
We need to figure this out, Laura. We need to find out if you're doing this.
Laura nodded, her face pale, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. The labyrinth was no longer an external entity. Its chilling presence was within their very home, hidden in the depths of sleep and forgetfulness. Laura sat in silence, her eyes staring blankly at the walls of the room they had lovingly decorated together. The shadows of their memories seemed to darken around her as she delved into the depths of her own mind, searching for any sign of the horrific truth. As she retraced her steps, blurry fragments of dreamlike memories began to surface. Echoes of places she couldn't recall visiting, hazy faces she didn't remember meeting. A sense of déjà vu overwhelmed her as she recollected the eerie dreams of wandering through unfamiliar streets and interacting with unknown people.
I remember. I remember dreams, strange places, faces, but they were just dreams, weren't they?
The question hung in the air. Were they dreams, or was she reliving her somnambulistic activities? The chilling possibility sent a shudder through them. Bob looked at Laura, his heart aching at the fear and confusion in her eyes.
Laura, we need to find out if you're sleepwalking again.
As the reality of their situation sank in, they realized this was far more convoluted than they'd initially thought. It had crept into their lives, entwining itself around their memories and dreams, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Laura's revelations grew darker and more specific. She recounted dreams that, in light of recent events, seemed hauntingly real. She recalled standing over a man in a lit alleyway, his face twisted in fear. She remembered the scent of damp earth and the distinct aroma of a particular cologne she had never smelled in waking life, but which now lingered in her mind.
And then there was a woman, near a river. She was crying. I remember the river, the moonlight reflecting off it.
Her voice trailed off as she recollected the woman's unique necklace, a silver locket shaped like a lily. She described it in precise detail, something she could never have known, as this information had been withheld from public reports. Bob paled at her words. The necklace Laura described was the same one found at the crime scene by the river, a detail only known to investigators. The scent of cologne she recalled was found at the male victim's scene, a signature fragrance identified by the man's wife.
Laura, those details, they were never released to the public. How could you know?
Laura's eyes widened, her breath hitched. She had no answer. Bob decided to verify Laura's unsettling revelations. He went online and found an article, buried in the local news, recently released by the police to attract potential leads. It confirmed the unique necklace found at the scene near the river. Bob's heart pounded in his chest as he read out the details to Laura.
The woman by the river. She wore a silver lily-shaped locket, just like you described, Laura.
Laura's face paled even more. Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth. She couldn't deny the fact anymore. Her dreams held fragments of reality, of actions she couldn't remember. In another news piece, the victim's wife had recently shared her late husband's love for his signature cologne, the same scent Laura had described.
But I couldn't have known. I shouldn't have known.
As the chilling reality settled in, Bob, with a newfound determination, came up with a surprising suggestion.
Laura, we can't go to the authorities, not yet. Not until we understand what's happening. We need to leave.
Laura stared at Bob, stunned. The idea of fleeing was frightening, but the fear of being found out, of being separated from their children, was even more terrifying.
But what about the kids, Bob? Billy, Michaela, Lincoln, Logan. We can't just uproot them, take them out of their lives.
Bob nodded, understanding her concerns. He had been thinking about that, too.
We can make it work, Laura. My friend in Nicaragua, he owns a coffee plantation, a remote place. We could work there, homeschool the kids, start a new life, at least until we figure things out.
The idea seemed outlandish, dangerous even. But the alternatives were worse. Laura looked at Bob, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty, but also a glimmer of hope. As crazy as it sounded, they had to protect their family at all costs. Bob went to their basement, rummaging through old boxes until he found the old laptop he was looking for. He had not touched it in years, but now it was their lifeline. As the machine hummed to life, he began the search for the contact information of his friend in Nicaragua. While searching, Bob came across a strangely named file, BTC_XYZ. Intrigued, he clicked on it. His screen displayed a Bitcoin wallet interface he hadn't seen in years.
What the? I completely forgot about this.
Bob had dabbled in cryptocurrency years ago, purchasing 100 Bitcoins when they were worth about $100 each. It was a speculative investment, one he had forgotten as the pressures of life took over. As he checked the current balance, he was astounded to see its current value.
Laura, you're not going to believe this. This wallet, it has 100 Bitcoins. They're worth $3 million now.
The air around them seemed to buzz with tension and disbelief as they contemplated this unexpected turn of fortune. With a newfound fortune and a daring plan, Bob and Laura bought a luxurious yacht, large enough to accommodate their family and their faithful dog, Pippa. They cast off from New York, embarking on a journey to an unfamiliar land. The journey was a strange mix of excitement and anxiety, but as they navigated the turquoise Caribbean waters, they could sense a spark of hope. Their kids, intrigued by the sudden adventure, adapted quickly. Billy and Michaela took on responsibilities, helping to steer and maintain the yacht, while the young Lincoln and Logan reveled in the novelty of their maritime home. After several days at sea, they finally docked in Nicaragua. With the assistance of Bob's contact, they purchased a sprawling plot of land nestled between the lush tropical forest and the pristine beach. Construction on their new mansion commenced immediately. It was designed as a tropical paradise, a 3-story structure, accentuated by wide balconies that offered panoramic views of the ocean and the jungle. Natural wood and stones, sourced locally, were used extensively, creating a harmonious blend with the surrounding nature. On the ground floor, a large, open-plan living area opened up to a stunning infinity pool, seeming to blend into the azure ocean. The upper floors housed the bedrooms, each one spacious and with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering breathtaking views at sunrise. A gourmet kitchen, a home theater, and a library were also part of the design, providing all the amenities they could desire. Months turned into years. Their tropical mansion was completed, and the family settled into their new life in Nicaragua. The mansion stood as a beacon of their resilience, a testament to their determination to build a safe haven for their family. Their days were filled with homeschooling, maintaining their new home, exploring the surrounding jungle forests, and occasional trips to the local markets. They became an integral part of the local community, contributing and growing with it. Their children adapted remarkably well to the new lifestyle, the younger ones barely remembering their old life.
We did it, Bob. We really did it.
Yes, we did, Angel.
Laura's sleepwalking incident ceased entirely. It seemed that leaving behind the stress of their old life had helped her overcome her somnambulism. They never discussed the murders, choosing instead to focus on the present and the future. However, they never forgot the past, keeping a vigilant eye on their peaceful surroundings. Their trusty dog, Pippa, grew older, enjoying her golden years in the endless expanse of their tropical paradise. Bob's friend visited them occasionally, appreciating the tranquility that they brought to his otherwise solitary life. The once terrifying Labyrinth seemed to dissolve into the warmth of the tropical sun. The family that had once been embroiled in a chilling murder mystery now lived a peaceful, idyllic life. As the sun set over their tropical sanctuary, the labyrinth that was their past seemed a distant memory. Against all odds, they had navigated its twists and turns, emerging stronger and closer than ever. Their labyrinth was no more. In its place was a new dawn, a promise of serenity and happiness.